warning. Joining me now to discuss this is Bernard Kerik, former NYPD police commissioner and former senior policy advisor in Iraq. Mr. Kerik, thanks as always for joining us here on Newsmax TV and America's Forum.
Thanks, John.
All right, so the FBI has said that ISIS supporters could conduct attacks against U.S. targets with little warning because it's difficult, of course, to assess the triggers for homegrown violent extremists. That's a pretty frightening statement, of course. It could happen at any time. And don't police and law enforcement personnel have any indication yet, a better idea of how to find these lone wolves before they actually plan to attack?
Well, I think especially in the bigger cities like New York, Los Angeles, Miami, and some of the others, Chicago, Detroit, naturally the municipal departments, state and local departments are monitoring a slew of intelligence that is put together about these groups, about possible suspects. But the bottom line is the social media networks that ISIS is using today gives them an enormous reach, not only here in the United States, but in the UK, Europe, to contact their sympathizers, supporters, and give them direction and an insight as far as what they would like them to do. I don't think this is a surprise to U.S. law enforcement, but the reach itself is really enormous. When you look at Twitter, Facebook, their campaigns, the ISIS campaigns on the social media networks is huge. So you don't know who they're contacting. You don't know who's monitoring their transmissions. And these lone wolves, they could pop up out of nowhere and create some major damage.
That's very true. You know, we recently heard the director of the FBI, James Comey, quoted as saying he doesn't like the name lone wolf. He'd prefer to call these terrorists lone rats. You know, does that make any difference to you? Is that just semantics coming from the FBI director?
Well, I think, you know, either way, he's right. Whether it's a lone wolf, a lone rat, doesn't make any difference. The bottom line, these are people that have taken the Muslim religion. And you know, Muslims are not terrorists, but there is a group of Muslims that have taken the Quran, hijacked it basically, and they have this enormous hatred for the West, for democracy, for freedom, for Israel. They want the annihilation of Israel, the annihilation of Christianity. And these people, they are here in the United States.
And we have a very good example of that. And of course, probably the most famous one now is the lone wolf attack. That was the Boston Marathon bombing. And yet in that case, there were some warning signs that the FBI had about Tamerlan Tsarnaev and his brother traveling overseas. You mentioned the influence of social media and the internet. We saw this before in the Tsarnaev case, but is there any real way that law enforcement can stay ahead of that wave of digital information? It's a waterfall of information, and they have to pick out certain parts.
The problem is you're going to monitor these sites. You know, a few weeks ago, I spoke about ISIS, and I spoke about their social media campaign. Within 10 minutes after I concluded that interview, they were all over the internet talking about my interview and passing it on to their buddies and their cohorts out there. One, we have to track and monitor these sites. Two, I think another possibility is to shut them down as quickly as possible. The continuation of the shutdown will frustrate them, will give them an inability to communicate with others. But keep in mind, we also have to monitor these things, and I think that the FBI, the CIA, and some of the other law enforcement agencies are doing.
All right, we'll have more on that part of this discussion coming up here in just a few moments. We'll step away for a quick commercial break. We'll also talk about the rise of radical Islam here in the United States with Bernard Kerik, former NYPD commissioner. John Bachman sitting in for J.D. Hayworth. We'll be right back after this.